All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the breakout session on the NSF Includes National Network Shared Measure System. I'm Brad Keller. I'm a member of the Hub's Shared Measures team. And with Tracy McMahon, I'm also responsible for the Shared Measures Affinity Group. Along with my colleagues at Tsushi Miyoka, Gary Silverstein, and Tracy, we're going to take you on a deeper dive on some of the findings of Hub's Shared Measures work. During this breakout session, we're going to provide an overview of key findings from the Shared Measures site and discuss how your projects can contribute to the data to the Shared Measures effort. We hope this will be more of a conversation than a presentation, so please let us know if you have any questions or comments, and we'll do what we can to address them as they come up. Let's begin by discussing the characteristics of students and educators who were reached by the 8 alliances during the 2019-2020 school year. And basically, what I'm going to be discussing in this session is all going to be during the 2019-2020 school year. That's the school year that was cut short by COVID in March. So that's the unit of time we're generally talking about. Data on student and educator characteristics are collected through the participant worksheet. And this worksheet is an Excel spreadsheet that gathers common information about characteristics of the students and educators reached in a given academic year. By using this worksheet, it allows us to aggregate data on the number and characteristics of participants reached across STEM BP initiatives. And although it's voluntary, all 8 alliances completed the participant worksheet for the 2019-20 school year. And the number of projects contributing data on the characteristics of their students and educators, we imagine it will increase over time as we begin to reach out to more STEM BP initiatives. The participant worksheet collects information about the number of students reached directly and indirectly in a given school year. So direct refers to students who were directly engaged in the STEM BP strategies conducted by a given project. So for example, these are students who knowingly participated in a defined activity designed to enhance their career awareness about STEM. Indirect refers to students indirectly engaged by the projects. And that could be students who benefited from a defined BP STEM education reform program, event, or activity, but they weren't necessarily aware of their engagement with that program, event, or activity. So as shown in this slide, 8 alliances directly reached out to a total of 1,925 pre-K through 20 students during the 2019-20 school year. Of this number, 19% were undergraduate students at 2-year IHEs, 51% were undergraduate students at 4-year institutions, and 4% were graduate students. An additional 509 students, or 26%, were classified as post-secondary students whose IHE level could not be distinguished. In addition, the alliances indirectly reached a total of 16,073 pre-K through 20 students during the school year. Of that number, 15% were elementary and secondary students, and 85% were post-secondary. Now, I want to highlight several caveats regarding the results. First, the participant worksheet does not collect information about the types or frequency of activities that students participated in. So, for example, the data can't be used to distinguish between students who participated in a 1-hour classroom activity and those who attended a 5-day educational summer program. So it's not at all a measure of dosage. Second, the data collected through the worksheet represents a duplicated count of students. So the number of times a student was reached both within and across projects. So for example, if a student participated in 2 separate activities in a given year, that student would be counted twice. Third, we did not collect information on the demographic characteristics of those students reached indirectly. And this is really a function of the general difficulty of collecting data for individuals reached indirectly. Finally, the first collection occurred during the COVID pandemic. So we suspect that the number of students reached is lower than it would have been had there not been a COVID worldwide pandemic. So let's go through some more of the numbers. The participant worksheet collected information about the number of educators reached directly and indirectly in a given school year as well. The 8 alliances that completed the Hub's participant worksheet directly reached a total of 1,880 educators during that school year. Of this number, 2% were elementary and secondary teachers, 10% were faculty and administrators at 2-year IHEs, 83% were faculty and administrators at 4-year IHEs, and 5% were educators whose level could not be determined. In addition, the alliances reached a total of 267 non-pre-K through 20 professionals, 67 directly and 200 indirectly during the 2019-2020 school years. And all the caveats I described about the, excuse me, all the caveats I described, it's going to be a second one, that regarding the number and characteristics of students also applies to educators. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the partner characteristics. We collected information about partners, the characteristic partners that had been engaged by the 8 alliances. This data was collected through the partner worksheet. The partner worksheet obtains information on organizations that are partnering with STEM BP initiatives. And these include organization name, organization type, and zip code. The hub was able to pull information from Alliance's annual reports to get things started, but ultimately the Alliances had to review and help us validate this information before it got posted to the site. The data on partner characteristics represents a cumulative, unduplicated count, except partner organizations that are counted multiple times, that are associated with more than one STEM BP initiative can be counted multiple times. It should be noted that the partner worksheet does not collect any information about the level or type of engagement for a given partner. And all 8 alliances contributed data and completed the partner worksheet. So the 8 alliances have engaged a total of 345 partners. Of this number, 213 or 62% are post-secondary institutions. 61 or 18% are community-based organizations, foundations, or other nonprofits. And 25 or 7% are IHE affiliated centers or programs. As Tracy showed you during the previous session, the site includes a map that allows you to view the geographic distribution of each type of partner organization. The site also provides some additional information about the characteristics of the 213 post-secondary institutions engaged by the alliances. As shown in this slide, 64% are 4-year public institutions, 28% are 2-year public institutions, and 8% are 4-year private not-for-profits. In addition, 42% of the 213 post-secondary institutions are doctoral granting universities, 28% are associates colleges, 14% are master's colleges and universities, and 14% are baccalaureate colleges. You'll also see we had a few special focus institutions and tribal colleges. Finally, I want to share with you some information about the characteristics of the resources that alliances have developed. The information on resources was collected through the STEM BP resources worksheet. And this form obtained information on resources that have been developed by STEM BP initiatives, including the resource name, resource type, year published or developed, authors, if applicable, and links to the resources, if applicable. As with the partners worksheet, the hub was able to pull information from the alliances annual reports to get things started, but ultimately the alliances reviewed what we had pulled and helped us validate the information before it got posted to the site. Data on the characteristics of BP's STEM BP resources represented a cumulative, unduplicated count, and all 8 alliances completed the STEM BP resources worksheet. The 8 alliances that completed the hub's STEM BP resources worksheet provided information about a total of 120 STEM BP resources. This includes 30 conference presentations, 25 newspaper articles, 23 briefs, 19 journal articles, 12 webinars or videos, and 3 books or chapters. The site includes many links to many of these resources. So now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Atsushi Miyoka, who's going to describe findings from the Hub's Collaborative Infrastructure Survey.
Thank you, Brad. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. I will walk you through the findings from the Hub's Collaborative Infrastructure Survey. But let me start providing you with some background. A hallmark of the NSF includes is the use of 5 design elements of collaborative infrastructure. These design elements include shared vision, partnerships, goals and metrics, leadership and communication, and expansion, sustainability, and scale. Each NSF includes project uses the design elements to accelerate its effort to address systemic barriers to diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. The Habits survey is designed to collect information about the collective progress that NSF includes funded projects are making, addressing the specific components of the design elements of collaborative infrastructure. 6 of 8 alliances participated in the initial administration of this web-based survey. The other 2 opted out because they already administer similar surveys, but provided us with their survey data. Each of the 6 alliances identified key stakeholders, such as PIs, co-PIs, staff, partners, researchers, and evaluators, who were in a position to assess progress regarding to design elements. The survey was administered in spring of 2021 and will continue to be administered in the spring going forward. The response rate for the survey was about 70%, representing 88 of the 126 individuals who were asked to complete the survey. One caveat regarding the survey is worth noting. Because the survey was administered for the first time in spring 2021, we currently have no data on respondents' perceptions of progress at the end of the first year of NSF includes funding. As such, we are unable to provide information about relative progress that a respondent would have reported for their initial year. In the future years, as we continue to collect the survey data, we will begin to obtain data from NSF includes projects that are in their first year of funding. Next slide, please. So if you are able to attend our plenary session, you have seen this image. This is a screenshot from the shared measured site presenting survey findings. The graphics on the site show survey findings using a respondents as the unit of analysis. We think that it is important to understand how the 88 respondents view the progress being made on the design elements. And we can focus on the distribution across the actual response options in the survey by focusing on respondents. We also believe the presenting data in this way is easier to understand and are therefore more accessible. Don't need to understand how the statistics were generated. In addition to presenting the survey finding using the respondents as the unit of analysis, we also present the findings using a project as a unit of analysis. We think that project level analysis is useful and practical in assessing which design elements they appear to be attending to in a given year of NSF includes funding. In this presentation, we will focus discussing such findings. By the way, the project level findings are also available on the site. Before diving into the findings, I want to mention a few things about the project level findings you will see. And I will try to do that without talking too much about technical details. Rather than using the simple composite scores, we analyzed project level data using a item response theory and a confirmatory factor analysis. Without going too much detail, these approaches can assess the reliability and construct validity of the measurement. Because of that, we are able to estimate the weights of each item that carries the magnitude or amount of information that contributes to the design elements. We use this approach to compute the scores for each respondent and then aggregate them at the project level, like project level mean scores you will see. To make score more meaningful, we standardize the score on a range of 1 to 100, with 100 representing the highest possible score. We use these standardized scores to assess the extent to which individual alliances have operationalized the design elements of collaborative infrastructure at a given point in time. If you are interested in learning more about the approach that we used, detailed information about these methodologies available on the site as well. Go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the finding for shared vision, which includes 3 items. Scores are relatively high, with ranging from 72.7 to 88.1 on a scale of 1 to 100. Project level responses for shared vision are at the highest for our project goals are informed by an assessment of the participant population needs, and at the lowest for our project has a plan that addresses systemic barriers to broadening participation in STEM. In addition to showing overall responses, we chose to disaggregate findings by the number of years that a project had been funded by NSF includes. That being said, we did not observe noteworthy difference here. Go to the next slide, please. The partnership elements consist of 4 items. We observed largely positive scores ranging from a 66.5 for our project as new partners to address a given need to 83.3 for the sum of our core and supporting partners represent a range of institutions needed to achieve our project goals. Once again, we did not observe noteworthy differences here. Go to the next slide, please. Goals and metrics also includes 4 items. Project level scores ranging from a 68.3 for our project uses data to make regular improvements to 81.2 for all of our core partners are involved in the process of making sense of findings that emerged from the project analysis of shared measurement data. On this particular element, we noticed some differences between year 2 and year 3. Alliances with the 3 years of NSF includes funding are slightly more likely to have a higher composite score for. Our project has a participatory processes to define its measures, indicators, metrics, and/or data collection method, which have a which is a 77.3 compared to 71.2. And our project has the capacity to track progress across all partners. For this one, our score is 72.1 compared to 66.8.
Sushi?
Yep.
I'm going to jump in for just a minute because there are 2 technical questions that I'd like you to address before you go forward.
Sure.
The first is for this, the survey. This is Alliance self-reported data. Are they rating themselves on a scale of 1 to 100? And I know that you addressed this before, but if you could just go back and explain how that works.
So the survey had 2 types of questions. One question is a 5-point Likert scale, and the other question is a 4-point Likert scale. And when we calculated this composite score, we did not rely on the simple composite score. Rather, we used the item response theory and a confirmatory factor analysis. By the way, the detailed information about this approach it can be accessed on our site. Because these approaches gives us a checking reliability and construct validity, we are able to obtain weights for each item, and we use those weights for each item to calculating a score for individual respondents. Then we aggregated at a project level. Now, recognizing these scores usually gives us a somewhat meaningless numbers. Recognizing that, we standardized the score on a scale of 1 to 100. We thought that's a probably easier way to understand what this score means. By the way, 100 is the highest possible score. And you are looking at this table is that standardized score. Again, the scale on 1 to 100.
The second question was, did you use any weighting to allow for any unequal level of participation from the project's alliances, or is this one result per project? And before you answer that, I do want to point out that on the site, you do have the ability to look at the responses, the respondent level responses by organization type. But Suchi, do you
Yes,
want to address?
yeah, I will answer the second part of the question. Yes, on the website, we do provide a respondents level findings, and you can filter by the organization type. So yes, you can. And a great question about weighting. We recognized that our survey is not based on any probabilistic sampling. Rather, 6 alliances who participated in our survey, they identified who should taking a survey. So we recognized some limitations, such as our survey respondents may or may not representing well on each of the alliances. And also we recognized a disagreement among the participants within the alliances on all of these items. But again, using this item response theory and confirmatory factor analysis, they do look at a correlation measure and a covariance measure, which is a part of assessing differences or giving a proper weights to a certain types of individual. We feel our approach is a sound scientific. Again, the detailed information is about this approaches can be accessed at the website. But those are great questions.
Thank you.
Yep. Can you go to the next slide? So this slide and the next slide lists 9 items for the leadership and communication element. We found that alliance responses for this element were overwhelmingly positive and appear to be well attending at the time of the data collection. That is compared to the other design elements. The scores range from 81 to 90.1. The highest is our project leadership structure, leverage the collective knowledge of partners and other stakeholders. This one has a score of 90.1. Go to the next slide, please. The lowest is that our project decisions are informed by input from our participant population. This one has a score of 81. We also found that alliances with 2 years of NSF includes funding are more likely to have higher project level scores for all of the items regarding leadership and communication design elements. Pause for a moment, a little bit. You would expect that alliances with more years of NSF includes funding would report more progress around the operationalization of a given design element. While we believe this is a useful way of systematically examining survey responses, we are somewhat cautious when making such comparisons and looking for some sense making around some of the differences here, as well as other design elements. Go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the items in expansion, sustainability, and scale design elements. I'm not sure how many of you are able to attend yesterday's session that talked about a network survey findings. One of the important findings mentioned in that presentation was that the strongest capacity needs are around expansion and sustainability area. Our survey supports that finding as well. These elements includes 4 items, and we observed relatively low scores, that is compared to the other design elements, with an overall score of 62.6. Also, we observed wider score range between the highest and the lowest. First 2 items on the table. Our project contributes to the field's knowledge base about effective strategy for broadening participation in STEM. And our project has a strategic vision of what activities will be sustained beyond the current award period, are 2 items that have the highest score of a 72.7. At the last item on the table, our project has secured funding beyond the current award period, has the lowest score of the 42.8. We also noticed some difference by years where NSF includes funding. For the first item, alliances with 3 years of NSF includes funding are more likely to have the higher composite scores. That is a 76.8 compared to 68.6. We see the same pattern for the last item. Alliances with 3 years of NSF includes funding are more likely to have a higher composite score on this item. And that is a 47.8 compared to 37.9. For the second item, we see the opposite pattern. Alliances with 2 years of NSF includes funding are more likely to have higher composite score than alliances with 3 years of funding. That is the 76.3 compared to 69.0. Go to the next slide, please. To sum up what we observed from the project level analysis, we listed the score at the element level here. The scores range from 60.6 to 85.6 on a scale of 1 to 100. The scores are highest for leadership and communication and shared vision, and the scores are lowest for expansion, sustainability, and scale. In thinking about project cycle, the variance of these scores makes sense. At this point in their project cycle, we would expect leadership, communication, and shared vision to be highest, given the need to unite around the shared vision early on, and the attention that have to be paid to leadership in these types of partnership project. And that progress on goals and metrics and expansion would be expected to lag slightly, given complexity and time required to implement shared measures, and the likely intention to focus on expansion in years 4 and 5. As we noted few instances in our presentation, we noticed the scores vary across items and between the years of NSF includes funding within and across elements. As we mentioned, we are somewhat cautious when making comparisons. It is possible that the characteristics of alliance funded in a given cohort differ. For example, in terms of maturity and complexity of their partnership structure, the range of barriers they are designed to address, the characteristics of their participant population, and the complexity of their overall approach. Also, respondents' perspectives on concerning their accomplishment or the progress they will still need to make around a given design element may shift as they recognize the complexity of a given issue, with respondents realizing more work is needed as they begin to dig more deeply into a particular work. There could be other reasons. We are looking for some sense making around some of the differences we observed in each of the 5 elements. Okay, I will stop here and I'm going to turn this over to Brad again, who is going to describe the findings from STEM BP outcomes. Brad?
Before we do that, there's one more comment that I want to address.
Sure.
And I want you to address it, and then I have a comment around it as well. The comment is along the lines of the actual precision in these subjective questions. In the future, it would be helpful to see the range of scores, if not a whisker plot, so that it's easier to understand if the difference in scores between years is real.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think this is something that we as a team thought about how to present this information, whether to make a graphics, the mean score, and then also standard deviation associated with each of these shared design elements items as well as the elements level, or we simply providing a table view. And we decided to go with the table view. But this project level finding that is accessible in the our sites does provide not only the mean scores, but also range for each of the elements. So you will see there. But that's a great question.
Right.
And we are curious that how this scale score will look like next year. Just like we said that this is the first time we administer the survey, and we currently have no data in their the projects that are in their first year. So we really cannot speak of any progress in that sense.
The only thing I wanted to add to what Sushi just said, as Sushi mentioned, the range of responses, the variation is included in the tables that appear on the site. And in terms of whether the difference in scores is real, one of the things we've not yet had an opportunity to do, but plan to do in the next couple of weeks, is actually go back to the alliances that contributed the data and engage them in a conversation about whether or not these scores resonate, whether this makes sense. This is what they were expecting. And over time, we will have opportunities to do informal, quick and dirty focus groups, if you will, around potentially each of the design elements to sort of dive deeper a little bit into what were some of the challenges that were encountered, what were some of the successes that don't necessarily come out through the survey findings, and what are the lessons that they've learned that they want to pass on to the community in terms of best practices for addressing the design elements. So this isn't the end point. It's sort of a data point that we can continue to collect data around, but also engage in some conversations going forward.
Right, I'll pick it up here, and we'll talk a little bit now about the inventory of STEM broadening participation outcomes. Network members are employing a myriad of strategies to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion across a wide range of educational and professional settings. And given the breadth of STEM BP outcomes that network members are designed to achieve, and the range of methods being used to measure progress towards those outcomes, we concluded that it would be extremely difficult and even perhaps counterproductive to collect common data elements that could be aggregated across projects. So instead of requesting that projects collect data in the same way, we've opted to develop a comprehensive and ever-expanding inventory of outcomes commonly associated with the systemic efforts to broaden participation in STEM. The primary purpose of this inventory is to highlight key STEM BP milestones that network members might consider using when planning and assessing their efforts. And I should note that the inventory does not specify or even suggest what specific data source should be used when assessing progress towards a given outcome. Rather, the assumption is that the network members will use whatever methods are most appropriate given the context within which their initiative is being implemented and evaluated. So the structure of the inventory includes three things. Constructs, which are the broad goals that the STEM BP initiatives are designed to achieve. That's the dark blue lettering at the top. Construct here is academic outcomes in this example. Dimensions are the objectives associated with a given construct. That's the column on the left. So in this example, it's undergraduate. And indicators of progress are specific evidence that demonstrate attainment of a given dimension. And those are the items on the right. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have different increases in the number and diversity of undergraduate students, STEM majors, that type of thing. These constructs, dimensions, and indicators represent a continuum of STEM education milestones that STEM BP initiatives seek to achieve. They're drawn from multiple sources, including literature on broadening participation in STEM, national STEM BP indicators, and indicators used by specific network members. Results currently presented in the inventory reflect findings outlined in the Alliance's annual and evaluation reports. Over time, we'll also identify project-specific STEM BP outcomes contained in other sources like journal articles, conference presentations, project websites, and contributions from network members. Here's an example of one of the entries in the inventory of STEM BP outcomes. You can see the indicator is at the top, the increase in number and diversity of undergraduate STEM majors who remain in a STEM major after 2 years of study. And then the example we have is from first two, the first two alliance report that a majority of undergraduate students, and then we talk about the results that they had. And you see at the bottom, we have a source. It's from the 2020 evaluation report, page 102. At present, we do not have many outcomes in this inventory, but we imagine that's going to change over time as the alliances mature and as more STEM BP projects contribute outcomes for inclusion in the inventory. There, and talking about contributing, there are two ways to contribute your outcomes to the inventory. The first is to reach out to us and let us know that you want to contribute an outcome to the inventory. We will take outreach in any way that you want. You can email any of us. When the website goes live, there'll be places there where you can talk to us. If you want to send us Morse code, anything that works, we're happy to accept. When we hear from people, what we'll do is we'll send you a form that asks basic questions and request a paragraph that would contain the type of information contained on this slide. The second way is to send us a copy of your most recent evaluation report. And what we'll do is we will review it and see what findings can be used for a given outcome. But we want you to know that either way, we're not going to place anything to the inventory without your project's prior review and approval. So as you review the site, please let us know if you think there are any additional STEM BP outcomes that need to be added. Now I'm going to pass things to my colleague, Gary.
Thank you, Brad. Before we talk about how else to contribute data, just any questions that people have about the data that we've just presented, any observations, any thoughts? We have a couple of minutes to engage a bit more of a dialogue here. I'm curious what people's takeaways are.
Can I jump in with questions?
Sure.
Okay, so, and this may not be the right time for this. If not, if you're going to answer it later, that's fine. One of the questions I had was, as far as collecting the data from the partners, is there a data agreement in place with them that they will participate in these surveys? Or do you have something like that in place, or maybe other teams?
In terms of the surveys, we talk with individual initiatives. We do it on a case-by-case basis so that we understand the way in which the survey, we administer the survey, but we have an understanding of sort of what the parameters are in terms of how that might work. But ultimately, we would work with you to identify which partners and other stakeholders it sort of makes sense to administer the survey with. And we can provide guidance in terms of the kinds of questions we're trying to answer and the extent to which they'd be in a position to inform. But ultimately, you know, we're going to work with whatever procedures and guidelines you have in terms of who we reach out to. And you're going to provide us with the names, so you'd have control over who we're actually serving.
Okay. And my question kind of went to, how do we make sure that they're actually completing these forms, surveys?
We did quite a bit of non-response follow-up with the survey. I can tell you that when we started, our response rate was fairly low. We were able to get it up to 70%. We did a lot of telephone follow-up. I'm sorry, we did a lot of email follow-up, and eventually we were able to do some telephone follow-up. But that was all on us. We did all of the phone calls. The only thing that we asked the individual alliances to do, and which we would ask projects to do in the future, is if there are supporting emails that they can send to the members to let them know that this is something that's being done with the project, approval and support, that's useful.
Okay, thank you. And I have more questions, but I'll see if anybody else, I'm going to step back for a few minutes.
Hello, hi. This is Bob Franco from Kapiolani Community College, University of Hawaii. Are the survey items within the collaborative infrastructure measures, are those static, or might they evolve over time?
we need to revisit them and see if they need to be
Okay.
revised over time.
Okay.
Part of it is a question of, do we think that they're answering the questions in a way that is realistic and reasonable? But the other thing is, are there any gaps? Is there anything that we're not measuring that we could have measured? So
Are
if you
you
take a look
asking
at
us?
yes.
Are you asking us for that? What
No, I was
would you
going to
ask
say,
us?
what I was about to say is, once the site goes live and you're able to download the survey, if you have any suggestions in terms of items we're not asking about with respect to the elements, by all means, reach out to us, let us know. We'd be
Okay,
delighted to
great.
hear from you about that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And that goes true for all of the data we're collecting. If you have ideas about things that we're not collecting that we could, or questions or concerns, please reach out to us and let us know.
It just seems like there's a real intention around, trends on those measures. And so,
Mhm.
as alliances mature, your hypothesis is those measures are going to head north, and those are probably things you'll want to report on.
Yes.
More broadly. But so it might be that you would add
Mhm.
1, 2, okay, rather
Yes.
than revise the language. Okay.
That would be the hope.
Yeah. Thanks.
Brad, I'm just wondering on the BP outcomes data, the example you gave was kind of a self-report. This is kind of what I feel after participating. Are you gathering any kind of administrative data on any of those things, or is it all going to be this kind of self-report data?
The short answer is we'll take whatever type we can get. Part of the challenge with this part of the data collection is that these because of the life cycle of the alliances, there aren't a lot of data out there yet that are being collected in a systematic way that we can add to this repository. We imagine this will change as time goes on, and as we reach out to other organizations as well. I think we would be happy to have any type of, if they have administrative data or something that's more concrete than self-report or kind of survey data, we'd be happy to take that. But the majority of what we got was from survey data, at least for those types of questions.
Let me just add to that. So I'm looking at the indicator for which this was reported was increase in number and diversity of undergraduate STEM majors who remain in a STEM major after 2 years of study. I would assume that going forward, as more projects are contributing to this, for that kind of an indicator, we'd start to get more of the traditional administrative type data that show what trends are showing in that for that particular area. So it's an excellent question. And just in looking at the evaluation reports, this is what we were able to find in the early life cycle of the alliances. But I think going forward, we're going to start to pull more administrative, more neutral type data, if you will.
Great,
One of
thanks.
the, to add to what Gary is saying, one of the things we try to do this time even is particularly those increased number of these types of data. We did look at some of the federal reports, such as the science and engineering indicator, to see if the pattern that we see here is also we see in the national level. That's something we try to do, and probably we continue to do so.
Excuse me, looking at the chat, a couple of questions that have come up. One was, how do you see your indicators in relation to the NSF science and engineering indicators, or the NASEM report on STEM indicators published several years ago? So we have something called the Shared Measures Framework, which serves as the basis for the indicators that appear in the STEM BP outcomes. And many of those form the basis for what the structure for the STEM BP outcomes are. So a lot of the milestones that are reflected in those statistics are reflected in the STEM BP outcomes. And one of the things we've talked about, and I think this goes to Leslie's question as well, we can also pull from existing reports that we find, including the NSF science and engineering indicators, and pull those into the STEM BP outcomes going forward, it wouldn't be project specific, would be more of a contextual what's happening at the national level, and then also reporting what's happening within individual projects around a particular indicator. So I'm looking at the chat in terms of the different administrative data that we could pull from to look at national indicators. And yes, we do plan to do that going forward. We actually started to do that, but we had to focus on making sure that we had all of the project specific data into the system. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, it just seems to me, the most problematic or the lowest scores were on issues of scale and sustainability. And it would be important for institutions to think about putting some of these measures into their institutional data systems, that would kind of guarantee a longer term sustainability of the work at individual campuses.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Other questions or comments?
You want me to go back to the presentation, Gary?
Yeah.
Gary, it's Leslie. I want to follow up on Alan's question about the institutional district or state level change. Would there be an ability to add in sort of a module about policy level change at institutions that sets up broadening participation in STEM?
The answer is absolutely. I think some of that is already in there. If you start to look at some of the STEM BP outcomes, there are some policy oriented. Many of them are focused at the IHE level, but it is designed in a way that those could be incorporated. So if there's anything that we're missing around those, we would definitely want to put those in. We haven't specifically called out the system change indicators that are in there, but I think they are embedded throughout, and we may need to find a way to highlight those going forward. So I'm going to, whatever the virtual +1 thumbs up. Yes, absolutely.
All right, I don't want to cut off the discussion, but let's go back, and we can also still hear from you as we continue to go on. All right, can you guys see that?
Okay, my concluding remarks are brief.
Okay.
Wanted to just close with a reminder that over the course of the year, we will be reaching out to NSF programs to see if they want to be a part of the Hub shared measurement system. We said this before, I'm going to say it again. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to us if you want to volunteer to have your program or project contribute data to the site. Next slide, please. This slide identifies all of the different ways in which STEM BP projects contribute to the site, and the ways in which they contribute may be expanding over time. And I want to emphasize that projects can choose to participate in some or all of these activities. There are several reasons we think for participating, including raising the profile of your STEM broadening participation initiative and its accomplishments, connecting your colleagues and your work to the broader NSF Includes ecosystem, learning from your peers, helping the STEM broadening participation field identify promising practices, and helping the field document the collective gains being made in a cross-systems effort to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. Next, please. So as Tracy showed you earlier, this is a form on the site to let us know which data collection efforts you're interested in participating in. And if you reach out to us, we'll be back in touch with you as quickly as possible. Both Brad and I will be receiving these emails. There is one thing I want to correct on something that Brad said earlier. I don't think we have the budget to accept information provided in Morse code. So anything else we'll be able to take. And that ends our formal remarks. That leaves us with about 10 minutes for any additional questions or comments you might have. Leslie, your comment, a question or a statement?
Which one? The initiatives of the network?
Yep, are focusing on the
I
last
got
one.
just a confirmation. I was just trying to summarize what
Okay.
I thought I heard.
Alan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think there's a, first of all, big kudos. You guys have done an incredible job of pulling this together. And having been at this for a while with some of you, I appreciate deeply the work you guys have done here. So two different hats. One is as a new alliance and just at the formative stage of, okay, we got funded and now what? There's, obvious building an integrated partnership from the get-go makes a lot of sense. And so is there are you folks in a role to be consultants for a given project in terms of helping that alignment? Or is it through the shared forums that one does it? How would that work?
Well, in terms of alignment, again, we're not trying to change any of your data collection procedures.
We haven't even put anything in place.
Right. What we are trying to do is put out a platform by which whatever systems you're using can fit into the broader shared measures system. But I think to answer your question, this is sort of a plug for the work of the shared measures affinity group and the evaluation affinity group. Not that they're going to change the way in which you do things, but they're going to connect you with others that have been doing this over time so that you can share your learnings and ask questions of those that are in a process to engage you in conversations around that. And both Brad and Tracy are the ones who run the shared measures affinity group. And I think that's probably where that part of it would occur. I wouldn't call it consultation so much as amplifying the work of the network, if you will.
I guess go ahead.
Just for quickly, Alan, if I could add, I think the shared measures affinity group is an important resource right as the website goes live for shared measures. And I know we've got plans to make sure that there's connections there because it'll allow folks to really have good conversations across network projects in the network around what shared measures might mean in their own setting and also how they might connect to the system that the team has developed. And I think to Gary's point, I don't think there's really a push to make sure that everybody's doing the same thing, but there's a push to make sure that everybody's thinking about it and thinking about how to be both a part of the larger network shared measures, but also to think about how to make sure that you all are learning from each other about best practices and doing it in your own work. And so that's where Tracy and Brad will be really important in facilitating that shared measure affinity group.
Very well said. I mean, at no point in this process did we feel like we were in a position to prescribe how information would be provided for us. We tried to accumulate it in a manner that would make it easiest for network members. And at times that means that we're not able to get into the weeds as much as we'd like, but it means that we have more people participating in a manner that is useful and of value to the network. There are a couple of questions in the chat. I'm not sure that I understand one of these. Any concerns about
Personally identifiable information, Gary?
Okay, I'm sorry, I
Risk
missed
in the
that.
data.
So in terms of the survey data, Sushi, you may want to talk a moment about the steps we take to prevent personally identifiable information, because we have procedures in place when we return data back to the sites to make sure that doesn't happen.
So when we receive raw stuff from the alliances, we do have a names and an email attached to it. And once we gather those information, all of these will be replaced with randomized numbers so that nobody knows who those are. And once we collect those information, survey actually includes a 30 or so items that try to get information for design elements, and also a few questions about respondents' demographics. And we do look at both types of data. And this year, for example, we noticed that because of the sample sizes is still small, we noticed that some of the questions that we had actually if we attach to that data, review who that is. So we remove that data, and that particular information was not even a part of the analysis. I don't even know, and those information is a secured in a secure location. And when we send back to a alliance specific data, we do remove those information. So in that way, we try to protect a PII information.
And once it's within the system, it's aggregated up to a level where both in terms of the survey data, but also in terms of the participant characteristic information, all of that is protected. There's another question about whether we're collecting information related to the role of the backbone organizations. At this point, not specifically. It's something that we certainly could add in the future. I don't think we have any items from the survey that get at the role of the backbone specifically. I think it gets more at some of the functions that the backbone would facilitate, if you will. Would love to see data collected on the backbone organizations. Absolutely. Again, I can't stress enough that this is a platform that can expand. So especially network members, if you have questions about backbone organizations that you'd like to incorporate either into the survey or some other type of process, we'd love to talk to you about it and figure out what those data might look like and how we might incorporate that into our site. If there are no other questions, I know we've got the youth panel coming up next, and I very much want to make sure that we're all there to see that. I think that's gonna be very interesting and very exciting. So I want to personally thank all of you for attending. I hope that you found this useful. And when we launch the site in September, it's going to be a bit of a big deal. It's going to be done with a little bit of fanfare. And we hope that you go see it and let us know what questions or observations you have around it. So thank you very much.